Vishnu, who trained in Malta, and then qualified for the games of Tokyo and the most recent games in Paris. Um, so um, so yeah, it was a good time having people from India over in Malta training and leaving an impact on the sports there. Okay, so not to spend so much time like talking about myself because now they can check the Instagram page and so on, and they can have a look at the past. I would like to see what most everyone is interested in. Is everyone coming from the football, soccer world, or else we have a mixture of different sports within the listeners?
I think we've got a mix of everything. We've got certain people who are pursuing their masters and interested to become a SNC coach in football. We've got some of the SNC coaches who are already working in soccer, and we've got SNC coaches now working in with different sports across the spectrum.
Okay. All right. So majorly, I was asked to speak a bit about periodization and how we plan the week. Um, I think what helped me most in the past was all the experiences from different sports. So when I started strength and conditioning in Malta, there was none. So I was the only person to help the main coaches. So I had a lot of technical coaches in basketball, football, golf, sailing, and whatever sports. We had good technical coaches, but what they had missing is the person that puts it all together, such as myself. So they had the person. They did not have the person to educate the coach on the physical amounts that should be worked on, so there was this massive gap which I started filling. First started actually with swimming because we had a lot of swimmers, but their coaches did not know how to go around using the gym to help them. Obviously we know swimming is a really powerful sport, so you need to be extremely strong. And then from there, it evolved into sailing. And obviously, I always liked football, so I always want to be involved in football. So I started football as well. Football, as many other countries, is always one of the most, or at least on the Western Hemisphere, like one of the most popular sports. So they're always a bit more advanced and more economical, so they have more funds. But still, in football, there was a lot of misconceptions, there was a lack of accurate information. And this is because it is a really widespread sport, and it is quite difficult to to obviously monitor what everyone's doing. So there are many ways to get to the end goal. So and all these experiences helped me patch up my program when it comes to, for example, football. Because if some of you here come from individual sports, we usually follow the studies by Poppa et al. So we're moving in a linear periodization, which is sort of a block periodization, which is somewhat easy because we can obviously focus and move on things else, then keep building up. Whether in team sports, you need to do this on a weekly basis. So whilst still improving your player on certain metrics. Okay, so if I want my player to be more powerful. At the same time, I need to keep his endurance levels high. I need to keep him sharp for the weekend and whatnot. So there, where it comes really, really challenging. But my various experiences like helped me to be able to plan this better. Unfortunately, in the books, it's a textbook case scenario. So um, we get our templates, we get our scenarios, but most of them, most of the time, you find yourself outside of the ideal scenario, and outside of the ideal template. And that's where most of us get confused, especially straight after graduating. So if we are talking about football, soccer, we know match day -1, match day -2, match day -3. But what happens if the coach or the staff changes their mind and there's an extra day of rest? What happens if there's an extra fixture throughout the week? Then you have to switch around all the sessions. What about also if you can see that your team needs an extra day of rest? So we are not just looking at the numbers, because sometimes just looking at the numbers is just a lie, but we are also getting the feel of everyone, the feel of everyone, how they're introducing themselves in the morning, if they're eating enough, if they're complaining. Then you can pick up on some signs that your team, for example, needs an extra day of rest, or else you can realize that they are not maybe working enough, because you can start hearing the communication from them. So by time, one of the most important things I've learned is the taking on input from various areas. So I'm not just looking at the numbers. I'm not just looking at the counter movement jump we do match day -3, or at the GPS units of the top end speed. But I'm also picking up on the players' posture in training, on the players' attitudes, on the players' communication. And then all this is helping me take more informed decisions throughout the week when we are as a team planning the whole week. Now, when it comes to being a supporting staff, it can get a bit complicated as well. So it depends what environment you are in. It depends on the budgets and whatnot. So I've been in setups where I had to do everything, sometimes also being a club doctor and a club physio, because I wasn't present. Some budgets are what they are, and you have to step it up. And some places we had no assistant coach, so I was also involved as being the assistant coach. And then some places like where I am present, we have the full-time trainers, physiotherapists, we have the assistant coaches, we have the keeper coaches, and then you have to learn how to interact with everyone, which is somewhat challenging as well, because if it's you by yourself, it's your word, and the trust of the coach. But then if it's the entire team, and then you have to explain what you are doing to the entire team, and then that's when the communication with the staff is a key component for success. You also have to be flexible to understand what the main coach wants. Okay, so when we are planning, the main coach is the number one lead. Okay, so they are in the lead, they are driving the ship or the plane, and you obviously have to support in that role and not forget that you are there as a support. Various coaches like various input. So I had Italian coaches in Malta, which just asked me when they can work tactically. So that made my life easier, and I could just plan the entire week with the SNC perspective, learning, knowing how much they can run, what times, what intensity we should put throughout the week. And then I had other coaches where they would be like, listen, you just have the 30 minutes of strength a week, and that is your input there, and then the rest is planned by the coaching stuff. So there's various sides of the spectrum which you will meet as you work with various clubs, and you have to adapt, because if not, it will be a very frustrating area. And you have to understand that the various ways of these coaches working comes from also the education they follow. So some of them, the courses that give you the coaching license, which I also have the UEFA C, um, they teach you how to be a coach by yourself. So you have to be the tactical coach, you have to be the performance coach, you have to also be the nutritionist, the everything. So certain coaches, when they do these license, they are used to doing everything themselves. Obviously, when you do everything yourself, be well educated and well experienced and versed within each within each subject, such as aerobic capacity and strength and power and whatnot. Now, having said this, that you have to be flexible as well, you also have to build up your own philosophy and think about it as I got this from St. Mary. So they always taught us how you should have a toolbox of exercises and things that you know why you're doing them. And then as you go along, you have to adapt those to the situation you are in, but not go and change everything every day. You know, by time, maybe you start doing a lot of things. As an athlete myself, I still do. Today, I test a lot of different exercises and protocols. So if it's isometric, if it's overcoming or overreaching, if it's maximal strength, if it's cluster sets, I still try them myself, so I understand how they feel. And if I'm working with private clients, sometimes we try new things and I can see their effects and benefits. And maybe sometimes a paper comes out or a chat with someone really well experienced comes along and changes my perspective on one of the tools I have in the toolbox, and I get to change it. So from speaking just in generic, I would like also to go ahead and give you some examples of my philosophies, which I introduce within team sports. So we have the aerobic fitness, which is a program by itself. I follow the Eurofit system taught to me by Dr. Dan Baker. I don't know whether he was there when you were at St. Mary's as well. He was one of our mentors in the master's program. He is ex Broncos SNC coach for a very long time. And it's a really good system where we visit the energetics we will be using via interval training. So it's the end point of it is the 15-15, where you sprint for 15 seconds and rest for 15 seconds. And you are working at a certain percentage of the maximal aerobic speed. Now, this changes to when we are within the season as well. So if we are away from competition or we have an international break or a Christmas break coming up, that's where we drop it down to 90% of maximal aerobic speed, and we work for longer durations, such as 90 seconds on, 90 seconds off. And this is giving us different adaptations. So when we are working on the 90-second runs, we are actually changing the structure of the muscle. So we are putting more mitochondria, more capillaries, more oxidative capacities. Okay, so it helps us get more oxygen to the muscle. Whether when we drop it down to 15 seconds, it is more specific to the competition, and it's working more on the lactic acid buffers within the blood, and also helping us to regenerate energy for the weekend match. So if you're having an aerobic session and you are well fit and well versed building up to it, it will help you be stronger and faster in the weekend. So that's the major aerobic program which I follow with every team I go, and we cycle it throughout the season, which also helps us not to peak at a certain point in the season and then have a drop off for the rest of the season. So we keep cycling this method throughout the entire season. And the way we cycle this is by having a 4-week block, and we build up for 3 weeks, starting with an easy week, an intermediate week, and we keep on building up the volume and keeping a high intensity. And then we have a 4th week, which we lay off, and then we start over again. And we repeat this, rinse and repeat for the entirety of the season. And this has helped my squads to stay fresh throughout the entire season, which can be long because you are seeing from July usually up until May, so it can be quite a long season. Okay, so that was the speaking about the aerobic training, and now about the strength training. I'm gonna have a read of what you said for some. I can put it on if you like. Just one moment. You give me 2 minutes. So I put this on.
Sure, Nigel.
So especially on what am I going to speak on now. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead until I open this.
Guys, if you have any questions about, we all understand, or we've heard a lot about periodization and strength. That's where our forte is. But periodization when it comes to conditioning is something that everybody here gets confused about. So if you have any questions regarding planning, periodization, how does Nigel sort of, periodizes? I don't know whether he's able to speak about his club or no, but to ask your questions, he'll be happy to answer.
All right, I will take you through a presentation through the main principles. So I'm gonna share my screen right now. Okay, so when we are planning, let me finish about the strength first because I started talking about how I plan the aerobic season, and now I would like to speak about the strength as well because these are the two major philosophies I hold, and then we can continue with the science behind it. So when it comes to strength, I usually use the post activation potentiation, or also known as the French contrast, where we go with a heavy weight, so with a heavy stimulus and then a powerful stimulus. And why do I do this? Because it is helping me keep the players strong throughout the season, so they are still lifting heavy throughout the entirety of the season, even if we have a match that week. But it's also helping me develop more power because obviously your nervous system is overstimulated after lifting something heavy. So then when you're going to do a depth jump, a squat jump, and alternate lunge jump, that is going to be augmented by the heavyweight lifted prior. Again, depends where I am in the season. This is going to change. So if we are in off season or if we are on a break, and this is where I'm going to go to high repetition. This is where I'm going to do circuit training because it's going to help my ligaments and tendons increase in strength, but with high repetition. But throughout the season, for my players to be able to take the demands of the sport, this is where we have to lift heavy and we have to lift fast. So the contrast system tends to be one of my favorites. And then there are other various protocols such as cluster sets, which help me move away from plateaus that some of my players might have. So for you that have never heard the term of cluster sets, it is mainly coming from weightlifting, where we do Olympic weightlifting, where you do a 6 repetition set interspread with 20 seconds after each 2 repetitions. So you do 2 heavy repetitions, 20 seconds break, 2 repetitions, 20 seconds break, and then you do an additional 2 repetitions before a really long break. This is tricking your brain of having enough rest when in reality it's not enough rest. So you're having high intensity and high volume. It's gonna help you on power, strength, and also hypertrophy at the same time. So if you don't have much time allocated, and then something like cluster sets is quite something good to work on. So those are my two major philosophies, the aerobic one and the strength training. And now I'm going to take you through the basics on how we would populate such a thing. So the major thing governing this is the gas principle, as some of you might have heard prior. And what we are trying to do here is we are training on your baseline, and obviously you have to understand, and this is where the main coaches tend not to understand what happens with the body. And this is where you have to step it up, because when we are training straight after, we are fatigued and we are not at our best. And sometimes you find coaches that closer to competitions, they want to work out even harder because mentally that's what makes common sense. No, we work harder because the competition is coming. So this is the reasoning behind it. But they forget that straight after training is not when we improve, but we improve in the recovery when we are asleep and we are well rested. So having an understanding of the guest principle, the general adaptation syndrome, is the first step of helping you populate the week and how much you need to push. So obviously you're going to train, you're going to be fatigued, then you have the recovery period, then you have the super compensation where you're going to improve above your fitness baseline. Then if you're not going to have that stimulus, then the adaptation is going to go back to baseline because what you don't use, you're going to lose. Now, being practical about this, you need to understand that your body is not a robot and your body is not always the same. Okay, there's a lot of things happening, such as stress at work, stress at home, which are going to affect the times you spend in fatigue, the times you spend in recovery. Um, when it comes to female athletes, there's the menstrual cycle as well, which is changing the times you are spending in each of the segments. And now the easiest question is going to be, or the first question that comes up is, how do I understand that my athlete is in which category? And again, this comes with um, this comes with experience because there are tests we can do. So where I am right now at Lexington, we do the match day -3 counter movement jump. So a very simple test. If you don't have force plates, you can reach upon a wall or you can use mobile apps, which are available nowadays. And we track their counter movement jump on the day of match day -3 against their average counter movement jump over the past weeks. And if it's below 5% of the average, then that's going to give me a red light. And I'm going to notify the main coach like, listen, this player is still in the recovery area, is still in the fatigue, and hasn't completed his recovery because he's way below his average counter movement jump. So, like that, on the next 2 days, on match day -2 and match day -1, if the player is going to start the game or we have an intention to start the player, we'll have to reduce his volume over the next 2 days. So we help the player push the recovery up and get into super compensation so they'll be above their baseline and be available without risk to play. So this is one of the monitoring tools we use. But having said this, experience comes into play to understand like the player where they are within this guess principle as well. So again, as I mentioned before, maybe you can get players complaining, maybe you can see their body language that they're not coming out for training before, they are not doing their muscle activation before the training. So you start understanding and picking up on these messages, and this should give you a good idea of where they are within this setup. So that's a bit on the guess principle. Now I'm going to take you through the loading. So how we plan, how we structure, we have to start. Usually we take it on a macro cycle. So we take a year to 6 months. Some planning goes also from Olympic cycle to Olympic cycle. So from now I'm working with a young athlete. She's 14, she's a swimmer, and she will be 17 by LA 28. So we are focusing on that Olympic Games. So obviously you have to understand that this goes well above a year when you are working with individual athletes. Generally, within a team, you are working within a year to 6 months blocks. Then you break it down to mesocycle. We have weeks to months, depending on the literature, depending on the availability, depending on your philosophy of loading. So some people might spend 4 weeks on strength. Some people might spend 12 weeks. So it depends also the availability you have with the player. And then we break it down to microcycle, which means the sessions, days, or the week. I'm gonna take you through. Okay, planning the what's going to change from within the mesocycle. So this is after the 6-month block. So usually when we're talking about strength, this is how we play with the sets and repetitions. So the strength transmutation bit here is where we go heavy. We do 3 sets of 5 repetitions. Here we push at 75 and higher of the 1RM. And we build up. We start with 3 sets, 4 sets, 5 sets. As I said, gave the example prior of the aerobic runs. But same thing within the gym. And then on the 4th week, we're going to drop the volume and maintain the intensity. This gives the body a bit of time to recover before we go into the next block. When we go into the realization phase, this is when we want our athletes to perform. So also we are getting more specific from more general squat. So as we had a full squat prior, now we're going to move into a quarter squat. So a quarter squat is more specific because when you're running, you are never hitting a full squat deep position, but you would rather focus on the quarter squat. So here, for example, we changed the exercise. So we went from a full squat into a quarter squat, and we increased the intensity and dropped slightly the volume. So we went down to 3 repetitions instead of 5. We increased from 75% to 85% of 1RM. And then again, we take the same structure of 3 sets, 4 sets, 5 sets. And then what we did in the 4th week, went up to 6 sets, but we dropped to just 1 repetition. So we maintained somewhat the same volume as we had. This is an example of the weight, of the periodization within the weight room. You have to have a basic understanding. This is one of the slides I don't really like to use because it depends a lot on the individual. It depends on the history of the training history of the individual. It depends on the season period. So if it's at the start of the season is one thing, in the middle it's another, at the end of the season it means another. So all these things are gonna change. But you need to have a roughly good understanding of what is going to cost your body most. So if you're gonna work eccentrically, and then it's gonna take up to 7 days to recover. So how is this going to affect me when I am planning? If I am doing on a Monday, I am doing eccentric training, and I'm going to do it again on Wednesday, and then that's me putting the player in danger because I know that his eccentric contractions haven't recovered yet. The damage hasn't been recovered, so I need to work on something else until the player recovers from this particular physiological component. The plyometrics, we know the nervous system is taxed a lot, so it takes up to 72 hours to fully recover. Aerobic, again, depends on the mechanical load, depends on whether there were changes of direction. Then you cause a lot of damage, then there's up to 48 hours. If it's just long, steady aerobic work, then within 24 hours, you can have already been recovered from it. And then concentric contractions and then aerobic, again, it depends on the intensity you work on. So this depends a lot from the athlete you have and how well trained they are and what period in their life or their season are going through. That changes a lot. Okay, this is how a week would look like. So we have Monday recovery, and Tuesday we usually start with aerobic, Wednesday strength, Thursday we focus more on speed, Friday technical, and Saturday the match. Now, when you are talking about team sports, you have to understand that just because Wednesday is strength, an example, it doesn't mean you forget all the other components. So yes, you are playing football, you are playing 2v2s, you are playing 4v4s, and there's the technical component of how you should move within such exercises, because at the end of the game, these are going to be translated in the full match. But the components of exercises will be strength based. So we are talking about 15 to 30 seconds of work. We are talking about the dimensions as well. Like, do I want to work on accelerations? So maybe I want to make the pitch a bit bigger. Do I want to focus on contact? So I make the pitch smaller. Do I want to work on maximum speed? So then I need to make the pitch much bigger as well. So these are all thoughts and processes you're going through when you're planning the week. Again, when it comes to planning, you have to see the coach's preference, because some coaches would rather start with the strength and having the aerobic after. They would rather have a recovery day the day after the match, not a day off and then recovery. My personal preference is having a recovery day straight after match day, and then they have a day off where they can clear their mind. But some coaches would like to just give them the day off right after the matches, and you have to plan accordingly, because don't forget, you are there as a supporting group. Also, my preferences are starting with the strength day rather than the aerobic day. And there's a big discussion in this, especially in Italy, and some Italian coaches in Malta would tell you that strength is always worked match day +3, so not match day +2. But conversely, my opinion about this is that when we are going in the strength room and we are going through the full range of motion of exercises, it's helping my players to get that range of motion and that mobility, and it's helping them to loosen up from all the damage that was occurred in the match. So the strength day within itself is also, we are working on a component of strength, but it's giving my players their mobility back, hence doing the technique in the right manner. So there's all these thoughts going through when you're planning the week. Great. So okay, I'm going to take you on one of the simplest methods of monitoring training loads, so you don't need any technology here. So here, what we do, and this is a really, really inexpensive, good system that works. So here we jot down the daily RPE. So we are checking the RPE between 6 and 20. You can use the system, the Borg scale 1 to 10, it doesn't really matter. There's just a lot of literature on this, so I tend to use this one. We mark it down of the player's RPE, so just easily mark it down. You ask them straight after the session, you show them the chart, and they're going to choose whether it was no exertion at all or a maximal exertion on 20 or anything in between. You multiply this by the duration of the session, and you get an arbitrary number, which is the load. What does this mean? This will mean nothing when you first look at it. But then once you start building a trend, you can start to match it and understanding what this means. So, for example, here I can see, for example, this athlete, I can remember we had an issue when she went over 3 consecutive days over 900 arbitrary units. She always fell sick the following week, and we started understanding that, okay, this individual player, when they're having 3 consecutive days above 900, she's getting sick, or she's getting hamstring or lower back issues or tightness. So as a coach, when you are seeing that, okay, you had 2 consecutive days on 900, you're going to make sure that you go back to the drawing plan, you see what you had planned for the third day, and you're going to reduce the volume. And like this, you're going to avoid the sickness, the tightness, the lower back issues, and whatnot. So again, whatever you write down and whatever you plan, you have to be ready to change it. And you have to be okay with it. And it's a bit difficult, because at the start, when we plan something, we are very somewhat, especially at the start, you are very proud of it. You took a lot of time to plan it, but you have to understand that you have to be ready to change it according to what the feedback of the player is getting. Don't forget, we are there for the players as well, and sort of not for yourself, because at the end of the day, the player is competing. So you have to somewhat not be so rigid on the program. The program is written down, and it's just a guideline for you to go in the right direction. But then as you go along, you have to change. And the more you change, the more you're able to change it in the right way, the more effective of a coach you are going to be. Let me find something. Okay, so I'm gonna exit from this slide. I'm gonna bring up something else.
Nigel, we've got a couple of questions. Would you like to take that or before?
Yes, go ahead. Go
Sure.
ahead.
So I think we've got Sayan Biswas, and he's asking that if you can show a sample periodization plan of and how you do it, specifically for
Okay,
conditioning.
specifically for
Conditioning. So
conditioning. Okay. Okay. Let me bring one up. So, all right, I will show him an entire. Now share. Okay, there you go. You can all see my screen. Good. Okay, so here we have a simple plan from swimming. Or an example of the swimming. So we have the macro cycle. You can see the long course season. So in swimming, you have the short course, the first 6 months. Then you have um, the second part of the season, which is long course. So first you compete in 25 meters, then you compete in a 50-meter pool. Um, we break that down into mesocycles. So general preparation, because we are further away from the competition. Specific preparation is the next block. Then we taper, so we reduce the volume. Then we have the long course nationals, and then we have the transition phase. You would also break down every week then the microcycle within that general preparation. So you work on capacity, on increasing load. The coach would also give you the technical component they will be working on. So in this case, the technique of free IM, mixed, and whatnot. And then going into the specific preparation, we want to work on more the speed and power after we have enough strength. And then we start obviously reducing all the volume, and we want to have more race execution. So here we start inventing sorry planning races within the sessions, making sure we do more dives, so the technical execution will make sure everything is correct, everything is sharp, and here everything is race based in the taper, but actually low volumes. So what we do as a general rule of thumb, we reduce the volume by 50%. So in the case of swimming, if we started 1 week, 2 weeks out of the competition having 10K, 10 kilometers every day, we're gonna drop that by 50%. So we'll just do 1 week prior, we'll just do 5 kilometers every day. And then on the same week, we'll just do 2.5 kilometers, but the intensity has to be really aggressive. Okay, that's just an example of the tapering in swimming. And then you race, and then we have the transition, getting ready for the new season. Should have a couple of more examples. This is how a week would look within the swimming, showing you like various sports. Okay, so we can get like a grasp of them. So here we have like the land in the morning, then we go for a swim, then swim in the evening as well. Weight training on the next day, swimming, weight training, and then a short course in the evening. Wednesday, then we're introducing an off in the afternoon. Again, but all this is going to be changed to what your player is experiencing and how they're feeling. I want to give you a really good example, just one moment, of how you would change the. I want to show you how the session in the gym would be written down, so you get a more of an understanding of how that would change on a daily basis. Then, so a session you would have all this information in. So the sport, the most important thing is the macro cycle. So what part of the season are we in? So we are in the long course, the mesocycle, specific preparation, and which week is this from the 5 upcoming weeks, and what are my goals? So here's power focus and increase in rate of force development. The warm up, which is important and not, but usually they have a routine, and I tend to keep it the same routine. So mentally, you are getting in the zone. As soon as you do these exercises one after the other, you are getting in the zone mentally for what you are doing. Then the session would be somewhat like this. So we have power pull-ups, 6 repetitions, body weight. So here we take off the bar. You also introduce the tempo, the eccentric phase, concentric phase, and the in between, rest periods, power clean, bench throw. So we use med pulls a lot. Then you put the strength component. And the strength component is after the power component, because here now the player or athlete is not as fresh as the start of the session, so we can work on the strength. But first, we work on the power, because there we have to go at 110% of our intensity. Okay, we are tired, we cannot improve on the power or speed. And then we do a strength exercise, so we don't forget the strength component going forward. And then we have some conditioning at the end. The conditioning depends on the availability. So sometimes we have time, sometimes the player is fresh enough to do conditioning, sometimes not. So if I have time, I'm going to work on what are the most common injuries within that sport. Okay, so if I am working with a wrestler or a boxer or a kickboxer, here I am going to work a lot on wrist strength. I'm going to work a lot on ankle toughness. So I'm going to the different range of motions. I'm getting them in various positions like bear crawls and whatnot, and overloading that position to prevent the injuries within that sport. If I am talking about soccer and I have time, I have conditioning time at the end of my session, then there I'm doing low level plyometrics. So we're doing a lot of small hops, small jumps, but a lot of repetitions to get their ankle condition strong and stable enough, because we're having, especially with the different types of turfs, we are having a lot of issues with ankle sprains and whatnot. So these low level plyometrics, when you have time to fit them in, this is the ideal time to fit them in. In this case, we had a swimmer, so this is where we put the famous Pallof press, the Swiss ball prone. So we're working on the core whilst introducing stability work as well. I want to show you an example of. Okay, so this is one of the most, I think, one of the most important thing to learn on how one exercise is going to be changed within the season. So when you are planning the season, as I said, you also want to understand what part of the season you are in. So let's just take a really simple, broken down example of a push-up. Okay, so how am I gonna change a push-up within my 10-month season? So I have the push-up in preseason, the push-up in mid-season, the push-up in the competition season. So in the preseason, I'm gonna go from 10 to 15 repetitions, and I will explain why. Take 2 minutes rest. Mid-season, we are increasing the load. We are going to 3 to 5 repetitions with the adequate rest. And then in the competition period, we are going to go for the power component, and we change the push-up into a power. Or you can do a clap push-up or whatever is going to generate a lot of rate of force development. And why? Because at the start of the season, I want to work more on those 2A fibers, on the oxidative system. I want to get those tendons and ligaments stronger so they will be able to take all the strength loads we're going to do in mid-season. In mid-season, I'm going to work more on the 3 to 5 repetitions, really heavy. There where I'm going to get my 2B fibers working, and I'm going to increase on my strength. And then I need to use that strength as fast as possible. And that's where it comes, then where comes the additional change of the push-up with the clap. The 6 to 8 repetitions with 4 minutes rest, because we want a fresh nervous system and you want to take as long rest as possible. Now maybe one of the questions would be, how long am I gonna spend within each block? This is an interesting question, and it's always changing according to the season and the competitive calendar, because the competitive calendar is always changing, it's becoming always more demanding, especially now in football we are having a lot of issues. So you have to change according to the availability of your player within. Usually we are looking at 3 to 4 weeks in the preseason section, and then we are building up to 8 weeks in the mid-season, and then we are doing 3 to 4 weeks in the power period. But again, this might change for an individual sport depending on how many competitions they compete in. Now, when you are working in a team sport, as I mentioned, like soccer or football, all these have to be reducted, and you have to sort of do a lot of patchwork within the season. So if we have an international break and I have the players left back, and then I'm going to revisit the hypertrophy or revisit the pure strength. In competition, so we have competitions that week, if we have games that week, then I'm going to be working on power. So yeah, you have to always think about how you're going to still keep these components trained within a competitive season, and not just forget about them for the off season. All right, would you like me to take any questions?
I think, Nigel, I have certain questions that I have posted to you through chat, but if you want, I can ask you right now. I think one of the speaker has just asked that how often do you prescribe aerobic zones, probably, or aerobic zones training for footballers? So what it means to say is like a lot of steady state cardio. Do you prescribe? How often do you prescribe that in your training plan?
Okay, so steady state, not so much. We only do it at on recovery days. So on recovery days, yes, there is a nice opportunity where to do that. And we usually do a 20-minute jog in total, and also that we interspread with some mobility work to get the lactate moving. At international breaks or long break periods, we go up to 8 minutes working. So we tend to push this, and we do 3 sets of 8 minutes or 3 sets of 4 minutes, because they are one of the best protocols to increase VO2 max. So we do that. But within the competitive season, we focus on intervals, and this is when we use the maximal aerobic speed, and we go up to 120% of the maximal aerobic speed, and we work that for 15 seconds. And to further answer the question, we focus on this once a week. If we don't have a match that week, and then we do it twice a week, but mainly once a week.
Perfect. I think another question that we have is, that what do you think about tactical periodization? Now, I don't know what is he asking about
Yes.
tactical periodization from a view of a different
No, no. So it's a very, very famous concept. Um, so this is where you will change the periodization according to how the coaches plays, which is quite important. And as I was mentioning before, I do like it. And as I said, for example, on the strength day when we are doing match day -3 or match day -4, we think about how the coach want players to play with their high press, with their um, laying back. And these are the cues that we are going to put within the session. So if I'm going to prescribe a 2v2, I'm going to keep it going for 16 seconds. Do I have a team always chasing, or do I have a team always laying back and the other team always attacking and one defending? So these different cues are going to be given according to what the coach tends to play. A very misconception with the Verheinz technical periodization, the issue is that they tend to keep the players outside of the gym, and there's this discussion of it's the gym or football, which is not the case, because you have to integrate both. What you can the strength I can get from the field is the functional strength, but I cannot never tap into the maximal strength that I'm going uh, um, to be to be gaining from them lifting a very heavy squat or a very heavy hip thrust. So the sometimes the discussion sways away from how it should be, which should be the integrated method of using both. But sometimes we are lost on discussing, it's football or the gym, which is the wrong way that discussion usually takes place.
Right. I think we've got a lot of questions, but again, we are short on time. So
Right. Let
we'll
me take the aerobic training protocol. Yeah, as I said, you can look up the Eurofit, so EU Aerofit. Um, so this, as I said before, we maintain it throughout the season, and it's helping me maintain the aerobic fitness of the players. We can do this by playing games, by doing 5v5s, 11v11s. But what you tend to have is the smart players. So usually the playmakers, which know how to play by doing two steps and being in the right place at the right time, giving the good pass, and you are not getting the aerobic adaptations you want from these players. So this is why we do the dry runs, we call them, without the balls, and this is where the place of intermittent running comes in place. If you manage to cycle it throughout the season, you can maintain the aerobic fitness through the whole season. Another question on ideal volume of plyometrics for football players. Again, this depends on where your player is right now. So, do they have a history of doing plyometrics? Are they new to plyometrics? Um, did they not done them over the past 3, 6, 12 weeks and months? Are they strong enough to do the plyometrics? Do they have a good base of strength? How is their technique? All these questions are giving me an answer to your answer to understand how much volume. But we do usually, for example, if we're going to do low skips, I am going to give them just 3 sets over 30 meters, because there's less impact, there's less load happening. If I'm going to do a high skip, then I'm just going to give them 1 set of 30 meters. If I'm going for speed bounds, then I'm just going to go for 2 sets over 30 meters. But as we go along, I would like to increase this. So if I manage to give them once a week this plyometric set, and then by next week I can go up to 2 sets, 3 sets, I keep on building, and then maybe lay off for a week to let the adaptation and the body recover from that stimulus. Yes, how do you prescribe intensity for conditioning in such case? Yes, a good question on how to prescribe different fitness levels for conditioning. So when we are talking about the Eurofit, this is why the Eurofit is a really good system, because they all have their measurements laid out on the pitch according to their maximal aerobic speed, and everyone is working on their 120% of their maximal aerobic speed. Now, obviously, you don't mark 29 markers, but you group them up on average to +1, -1 maximal aerobic speed, and generally you have 3 sets of groups, and those players are running up to their distance and back, and they all start together and finish together on the 15-second mark. And this will give you, even if you are working by yourself, which is somewhat really difficult to hit the individual needs of the players, this will give you a really good practical method on how to tap in the individual player's fitness. I'm really interested to know how synchronized between aerobic fitness and methodology is impacting protocol with creating environmental stresses, and how okay. Okay, so this is quite a detailed question to go into, and there are a lot of studies coming out depending on the weather, the temperature. Obviously, we have to keep in mind a lot of things. So, for example, where we are now, it got really cold, or in Malta, usually it's really hot. So we tend to change the rest periods as well. So more frequent rest periods, more time to hydrate. So you have to think about this, and you have to also think about the time for recovery. So when we are training in summer in Malta, we are sweating much more, losing a lot more minerals. The players are going to take much longer to recover and to adapt from the stimulus. So this is something we provide minerals, so potassium, sodium, magnesium within the session, or via pineapple, bananas, or else via mixed shakes that we use within the season. Good evening, sir. How does periodization model differ when an athlete is recovering from an injury compared to a regular training cycle? An interesting question on injury and players coming back. Again, we have to work a lot with the team. So generally, you have a sports doctor which does the scanning, so MRI or ultrasound. That then goes down to the physiotherapy, or how they call them in America, trainers. And then the information from the trainer comes down to the SNC coach, where I can understand that the player can do certain impacts. Can the player do impacts? Can he start running? If yes, you will start running on a low, consistent base, okay, and you keep the intensity low. Can the player do changes of direction? So a lot of players after injury can work in a linear phase, but not do any changes of directions. That's why you have to be smart enough to introduce drills, to have the player doing a lot of drills in a linear phase and still maintain his fitness. Of course, there has to be a period of reconditioning coming back when he can do changes of direction, because that will be more specific to the sport. Okay, I try to answer as many questions as I can there in the little time.
Right. And I think just a little bit add on to what Amir Hakim asked about, the synchronization between aerobic fitness and its metaphysiology. It also, a lot of, whatever question you've asked, that's great, but this is really a physiologist's role, or probably, a doctor, in
We can do another I
team
think podcast on this.
on this. Absolutely. So, but that's a great question. It's great that we can, learn from these complicated questions as well. So keep on. It really challenges all of us as practitioners. And I think we would love to ask and go on with the entire webinar, probably for an hour more. But we've got certain time limitations that we've got to stick by.
Yes, it is a big topic, of course. If I would like to say a couple of takeaways, and emphasize them before I leave, it would be that don't forget, you have to plan your program. So it gives you a general direction, but then don't be scared or shy to change according to the feedback of the players that you get. So, and as many of the questions, such as the plyometric one volume, there's a lot of questions that you have to ask. So don't think there is one answer which is right, because it's all going to depend on your situation, on your sport, on the phase you are in at the moment. So things change, and that is why there's not one book that obviously make it right.
Great, Nigel. Thank you so much for, such an insightful talk and taking us through your experience, over the period of a decade now. And, we really got to know about certain principles that we've, heard about, especially the gas, and, taking us through how you plan not only your strength sessions, but conditioning sessions. Uh, of course, the entire presentation was very insightful, but what I really liked was how you gave an example about progressions, and made it very simple, you simplified it as to how do you plan a simple exercise like a push-up in, off season, pre-season, and in season. So that was really a great insight for all of us, and I hope we can further going on as practitioners plan different exercises according to the season that we are working in. Of course, we are not working in an ideal environment. Probably, in individual sport, things might change differently because we don't get our seasons are not so organized like soccer or some of the team sport. But Nigel, thank you so much for taking out your
Very
time
welcome.
and taking us through your entire experience. uh, we would also share your email ID probably with all of these guys so that
For sure.
reach out to you probably if they need any sort of an internship opportunities, or probably if they want, if they have some questions of theirs that they would like to
Yes,
ask.
they can reach out on Instagram, on LinkedIn. Like, more than happy to stay in contact and to help around. No problem.
Perfect. And also, the entire webinar's recording will be available on YouTube. So if you guys want to revisit the entire video or the webinar, you can definitely go through. Of course, with Nigel's permission.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. Good night, and
You will. Thank you for your engagement.
thank you, Nigel. Thank you.
See you.
See you.